if I wanted to implement something a little bit more complicated, it was really hard to, implement it without breaking everything, until I found test-driven development. Hello. Shawnee here. So thank you so much for stopping by to see what I am up to this week. If you weren't here last week, you can watch that video above. But basically, I talk about what I did and implemented from the book, The Mom Test, and how I used that to reach out and get some feedback from my teacher consultant on my application, my prototype. And I also shared a little bit about how I'm getting back into the habit of coding every day by using the hashtag 100 Days of Code. And if you aren't familiar with it, just go on Twitter, enter the hashtag 100 Days of Code, and you'll see the wonderful community that actually posts that stuff. Yeah, those tweets. Anyway, so thank you so much for stopping by. Anyway, so yes, let's get back to things. As you all know, I am coding, I'm developing my application, adding the features and some of the feedback that my consultant gave me in regards to what I presented to her. And I actually wrote a tweet yesterday, I believe, where I mentioned something about test-driven development. Now, mind you, it's kind of hard to talk about, new topics every week because really all I'm doing is like heads down coding. But I thought I would use that tweet in this video or for a video because I feel like, and I could be wrong, but I feel like test-driven development doesn't get talked about a lot. I believe from some of the stuff I've read, there's kind of like a controversy of whether it's something like people should be doing. I know if there's like an existing application or, software, test-driven development is sometimes applicable, but sometimes not. I've also read that test-driven development is really great if you are developing an app or you're developing something in general from scratch, like from the get-go. And so I'm not here to debate on whether that is the case or what's best or any of that. I'm just going to share with you why I think it's the bee's knees. If you're not familiar with what test-driven development is, basically you write unit tests before creating the code for it. So basically your tests drive your development, and it really puts the developer in like blinders because you only focus on writing code that makes that test fail and then pass. That's all you worry about. And it's really great, in my opinion, a really great workflow when you are working alone, or if you have a huge feature that you're trying to develop that's super complicated. It really makes you sit down and really think about what's most important, what the main parts are. And I really like that. And plus, when you're testing, you don't have to do the test yourself. I mean, once you write the test, you don't have to type in all these values to see if it passes. You just put all those values and everything you expect it to happen in the test, and then the computer does it for you. Especially if you're writing anything that has to do with like calculations, you don't have to do the math in your head. You just write down, okay, put 20 plus 25 and it should be this, and you just put in your values and let it do its thing. One, it takes a load off of actually manually testing, because who wants to manually test, right? There's a gentleman on Twitter, but he also has a website, Uncle Bob, or Robert C. Martin. Go ahead and check him out. He talks about a lot about test-driven development. I think he's like the godfather of test-driven development. I don't know. He basically has 3 rules for test-driven development. The first rule is, 1, you're not allowed to write any production code at all, unless it is to pass a failing unit test. and I'll explain what I mean by that. 2, you are not allowed to write any more of a unit test that is sufficient to fail. And that also includes compilation failures as well. So when, your code compiles and you have a failure, that's considered, a failed test. All right, then number 3, you're not allowed to write any more production code than is sufficient to pass that one failing unit test. Yeah, a lot of rules, right? But actually by following these rules, what it does is it allows you to only write testing code that actually is needed to implement the feature. So you will not have code bloat. That's a don't-no. And I find that is amazing because to be honest, when I was first starting out, especially learning how to code and things like that, I had a lot of code bloat. Like my first couple applications, I could have submitted them to the App Store, but they would be horrendous to support. Mainly because there was a lot of moving parts. There was I had that huge view controller issue, where you have the view controller that handles everything. I forgot there's a term for it, but I can't think of it right now. But I had a lot of that going on. And I also, if I wanted to implement something a little bit more complicated, it was really hard to, implement it without breaking everything. Until I found TestDriven Development. And so, and to kind of give you the backstory, when I first started to really get serious about learning Swift and to actually start really thinking about making an application, I picked up a book. And this was about, I want to say 2 years ago. Yeah, about 2 years ago, where I picked up this book. Now, mind you, there's a new edition of this book out now, so it won't look exactly like this. But it is Test-Driven iOS Development with Swift by Dr. Dominic Hauser. And he does a really great job at showing all the ways of using test-driven development, from, testing your models, from breaking out functionality, dealing with networking and the kind of issues you might need to test for. So I definitely recommend picking up that book if you are interested in test-driven development for Swift iOS development. Definitely check it out. It's really good. Like I said, he has a new edition. So yeah, and I literally don't know if you noticed, but tons of notes I actually wrote inside my book, literally wrote inside of it, because it was that good. There was other things that I found online that I wanted to make sure that I wrote down, because there were some things that I was testing for that wasn't covered in the book, but it was a really good intro to test-driven development. Another thing I really love about test-driven development is that it makes you really laser focused on one feature at a time and making sure you implement that feature really well. And it is also gives you instant confidence that what you built will work almost all the time. Like as soon as you're done with your tests and you believe you're done with everything, once you fire up that iOS simulator and you start pressing things and things start happening the right way, that is just gold. All right, so if you're not familiar at all with test-driven development, I do have a series, my last series, where I show how I built a small, simple game using test-driven development. And so you can kind of see how I went about the workflow. But I'll do a rough intro into the workflow. So test-driven development workflow basically begins with red, green, and refactor. So red means you write the test first. You're not writing any code at all. You probably just have an empty file with nothing in it. There's no classes, there's no structures, there's nothing. Just blank file, and you write your test. You write your test, you run it, it should be red. It should yell at you. And this is important because this is the starting line. And once you get that red, it means that there's nothing at all. It's like a fresh start. You know that have code to write. And so when you do start building out your code, you write the simplest code possible to make that test pass. And the thing is, it doesn't need to be pretty, it just has to work. And it's better that it's simple, like easy to read, understand, things like that, because when you go back, you want to be able to easily change it. And you don't want a bunch of jargon and a bunch of crap in there. And then once you get green, once you get a passing green test, then you can go back and refactor and, rewrite certain things, remove duplication, extract common values, things like that. And the fact that you have a passing test, that should give you the confidence to improve on the solution that you created originally. And you do that for every method that you want to create, with every output, with every property, with every class, so that you make sure that what you're building actually will work in the end. And that's the whole point of doing test-driven development or writing unit tests, is to make sure that what you're writing actually works, actually functions the way you expect it to. Now, how I use it is I actually do kind of a mix of test-driven development, and mainly because I am building my application from scratch, I will use that red-green refactor workflow for really complicated like logic, or if I am changing something in an existing class or view controller or model, I will do the red-green refactor because I want to make sure that what I'm doing doesn't break anything. Another thing that I do is, by creating my test, I basically am creating a test suite like immediately, but it also allows me to break down those really complicated logic or behavior into really easy to work on tasks, basically. And I can jump in at any point, like, again, I work full time, so when I get off of work, I'll code for like an hour or so, and I can work on like 2 tests, and I am still building out my application, but because I have my tests, it feels like I'm making progress. Yes, I know I'm coding like twice as much, but I'd rather do that and know that I'm actually making progress on my application than to feel overwhelmed that I'm not getting enough done. Another thing that I use my tests for is documentation. Now, I write my unit tests to be very descriptive. They pretty much read like a sentence. My unit test method names are very descriptive and are very long. The thing is I don't have to write, or I don't have to type out those method names ever again once I type them out. They're literally written once and that's it. I don't call them at all. So I can write a really long sentence, basically a sentence for my method, and it's fine. And the reason why I do that is because it makes my test suite documentation. For example, I'm currently refactoring a major portion of how my app represents documents, and so I have it working. It's working fine. I have tests that show that it works, but because I have to do this more extensive feature, and I haven't touched these classes or this view controller in months, mind you. So literally what I do is I pull out the test suite on one side and then I have my class or my view controller on the other, and then I can read through my test suite and look at the code that I wrote and see what does what. And it's really clear, and it helps me to understand why I wrote something that way. but also to see where all the connections are, for one, and then where I need to make my changes or my updates or insert, some, new action. And that's really helpful, because when you have as many, once you start having a lot of files in your application, because right now I have about 23, maybe 24 files in my application. And then also my tests for those, I have like 110, I believe. So I have a lot of tests, I have a lot of files. It's hard to keep all that in your brain and to understand why you did this or how you made the connection to that. But because I have my unit tests, I can literally read through my unit test, because it does read like documentation, and also lets me know what, you put a value in, what to expect. It just makes it a lot easier to go back and fix things, or to add, or to insert a different functionality. So that's what I mainly love about unit testing, is that very, very, very useful feature. Now again, if you aren't familiar with unit testing, I do have a series, my most recent one actually, where I show how I use TestDriven Development to create a very simple game. So if you want to check that out, it'll probably pop up right about here. But definitely check that out if you're interested in doing test-driven development, or how to use test-driven development in Swift. Now Swift uses, or actually Xcode uses XC test framework, and it's pretty good. I like it. So I do apologize for anyone who's following me who, comes here to see what I'm up to as far as like business side of things. Yeah, this week not so much. Again, I'm coding like a mad woman over here, so that's really all that I'm like really focusing on. But if you did find this video informative or entertaining or whatever, just give it a thumbs up. Please like, share, subscribe. I already said the thumbs up, that's like, right? Yes, please subscribe. Click the bell below. Yeah. All right, let me get back to coding. Till next time, friends.